pro-Morsi militias were firing tear gas at us, and we don't know. We don't know what the situation is right now outside. Like, all I hear is a lot of gunshots, and I saw the Central Security Forces protecting the pro-Morsi militias and then giving them a way to attack the protesters.
Okay, just tell me a little bit about what you mean by pro-Morsi militias.
They are the pro-Morsi who arrived to our sit-in this morning and damaged and broke our tents, and then occupied the area that we were in, kicked us out, and now now they're attacking us.
You're inside. Sorry.
They have weapons. This is what I mean.
You're hiding inside a building, you say. How far away from the trouble are you?
I'm in the middle, but I'm in the building.
And are you alone, or are you with a group of people?
I'm with a group of people.
And your intention in going out onto the streets and setting up camp, as you describe it, was to do what? Did you expect this kind of reaction?
We're here to topple this regime. We did it before, and we're going to do it again. I'm not only protesting against the constitutional statement that Morsi did, I'm protesting against now 4 months of his policies that does not differ from what we voted against last year or the year before. It's not about the Constitution only. It's much more.
Well, in a sense, that might be more disturbing to a lot of people listening. If it were against particular policies, one can understand the demonstrations if you're looking at it objectively. But for you to say you're going to topple the regime when this was a president who was democratically elected, what do you say to that?
That it was democratically elected. Does it give the regime the right to shoot at people and kill people for protesting against this constitutional statement? We spent 10 days being shot at by the police that the regime uses against the protesters. How many months should we wait before we say that we don't want this regime? What else do we need? In 5 months, this regime has done everything that Mubarak has done in 30 years.
And just give me an idea. You're in a building, you're with a group of people. I don't know whether you can see out of any of the windows or doors, or whether perhaps it's too dangerous to do so.
Outside, all I can hear is gunshots.
All right, well, if you could get back to us, if it's at all safe for you to do so, we would appreciate that. We'll leave you for now. That's Salma Saeed, one of the protesters, one of the anti-Morsi protesters, I think we should call them now, objecting, she says, against not only the constitutional changes, the decree the president used to invest himself with more power, but also what it believes was not a free and fair election. Well, let's bring in Abdul Monim Said from the Al-Ahram Strategic Center, which is a think tank. Abdul Monim, just tell me a little bit about what your group represents and where you stand on what's happening there.
Well, I'm standing as any think tank can be. I mean, to look and analyze what's happening. Egypt is a house divided, and it's divided along the lines of the civic versus the religious, and along the lines of, are we going in Egypt to respect the rules of the game or not? The civic against the religion is a deep one. It is never resolved in the Egyptian modern history, but it is culminated after the revolution, since the referendum time, in which, the political forces of the revolution itself was divided along these lines. And they allied themselves on the presidential election behind Morsi, when it seems to be that Mr. Shafiq might win the elections. And they got certain commitments from the president. One of them was to repeal the Constitutional Assembly and restore balance to it. He didn't. And also to make sure that the Constitutional Assembly will be representing all views regarding the freedom of Egyptians and the democratic rules of the game. He didn't. And even when he made a constitutional declaration, he said, and put it in his declaration, that he will give 2 months more in order to allow for reconciliation between those who are on the right representing religious views and those who are on the left hand representing civic views. But all of a sudden he turned into having a constitution to be presented to the people in 15 days, in which the rules of the game are saying that it should be presented to the Egyptians for at least a month for public debate. The constitution that we got at hand is actually a religious constitution. It has articles in it that start putting Egypt on the road of an Iranian road, by which the religious authorities and religious schools will be controlling the process of legislation.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to bring in Ibrahim Arafat. I introduced him a short while ago, but we haven't heard from him yet. Professor of Political Science at Qatar University. We may not see much of your face or of my face indeed. That point might be a blessing for the viewers, but we're going to stay on these live pictures and get your thoughts, Ibrahim. If the president wanted to break this up, if he wanted to get the anti-presidential supporters, activists off the streets, he would have to use either the security forces, as we've seen, the riot police there, or perhaps call in the army. Would that be unthinkable?
I think, nobody can predict what's going to happen in Egypt in the coming few hours or days. But President Morsi should not think of bringing the security forces or the military forces. He has to behave as a president for all Egyptians. Egyptians, when they voted for him, they wanted a man who reconciled between every Egyptian. Egyptians expected the revolution and President Morsi to make Egypt a melting pot. Traditionalists, modernists, Islamists, civilians, all kinds of Egyptians should be mixed together in one melting pot. Unfortunately, with the misfortunate policies of President Morsi, Egypt turned from a melting pot, a hopeful melting pot, into a boiling pot. So now I think he has to think of a political solution before he invites the army or the more security forces. He has to stop. Actually, he has to take steps to repeal his constitutional declaration. He has also to think of bringing a wide national committee to relook again at the items or articles in that constitution.
Is he that sort of man? Is he pragmatic, or is he stubborn?
I think he suffers a lot from, his belonging or his identity as a Muslim brother. This organization is built in a way, it's not a dynamic group. It cannot accommodate with circumstances that quick. So I think he has to always consult his group. This is the problem of an ideological group. President Morsi is a member of an ideological group, and Egypt is seeking a revolution away from ideologies. This is the problem. He has to consult his group every time. He has advisors inside the palace representing the group, and this group of advisors are quite strong. And we have today, 4 of the most independent advisors have resigned, and he is left over with, those represent his own group. So the man has fallen into the trap of the Muslim Brothers before he became a president, and now after he is the president of Egypt.
Let's go back, Ibrahim, to one of our correspondents. We have 2 in Cairo. We have Shireen Tadros, we have Rory Challens. I can see a picture off air here that shows Rory Challens with no lights on. I don't mean that metaphorically in terms of his decision-making, but I simply mean that nobody switched the lights on, so we can't see him. So, Shireen, it's not that you're second choice. Let's go to Shireen Tadros, who's in Cairo. The suggestion from our studio guest, Ibrahim Arafat, is that there was a certain inevitability about this, given the fact that President Morsi is part of an ideological group that really doesn't make pragmatic decisions. It just ploughs along in its own way because that's the way it is.
Well, I think it's inevitable because the country was very divided even before the elections began. So what happened was there was no attempt, I think, from the very beginning when Morsi took power to address or even appreciate the fact that his majority when he won the elections was very slim indeed. He won by 51 or 52% of the vote. And bear in mind, he was running against Ahmed Shafi, a former Mubarak era official, a former prime minister of Hosni Mubarak. And so a lot of the people that we're seeing out on the streets now that we're calling the anti-Morsi protesters probably voted for Mohamed Morsi to become president, because at that point, months ago when we were voting, it was either Mubarak era official or Mohamed Morsi, so people went for that. So there was a lack of appreciation, I think, on the part of the Muslim Brotherhood and Mohamed Morsi and his advisors that there was a slim majority, or his legitimacy did not run deep in the country. And given that, you would have thought he would be more consultative. And I remember very clearly his swearing-in speech at the university, where he talked very openly about the need to be consultative. He tried to reach out to liberals, seculars, even the Christians, talking about having a Christian vice president, if you remember, way back then, in order to try and bring in these other forces. And it seemed that there was some sort of opening up, an idea that he needed to be more consultative and they needed to start forming these coalitions. But that, David, quickly disappeared. And what we saw was a group around Mohamed Morsi from the Muslim Brotherhood, the high levels of the Muslim Brotherhood, we should point out, that were calling all the shots. And those other forces never came into the fold. And that really is what began the divisions in society and really made people worry on the ground.
Who were these people who were pulling his strings, if you like?
Well, the inner circle of the Muslim Brotherhood, of course, a lot of people have been talking about the role of Khairat al-Shatir. If you remember, he himself was a presidential candidate before he was disqualified by the Elections Commission. If you like, the brain of the Muslim Brotherhood, someone who, well, Mohamed Morsi's protege, as it was said at the time as well. And it's been said that he and those who are close to him are the ones who are calling the shots and are closest to him in terms of his advisors. And there's been this thinking, really, David, that at the end of the day, the Muslim Brotherhood were never used to being in power. They were always used to being defensive in opposition, and they've carried on this sort of defensive opposition mentality. So when Mohamed Morsi decided to, come out and address the crowds after this decree, the first address was at his own rally outside the presidential palace, where he addressed his own supporters rather than a speech on national television. So it became very clear to the population here that he was acting within the realm of the Muslim Brotherhood and talking to his own supporters. And this has really been, according to a lot of analysts, the failure of Mohamed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood, that they haven't tried to reach out and have this wide appeal.
That it is, in fact, one Egypt and that he is president of all of Egypt. I get the sense of what you're saying. Shireen, thanks a lot. Ibrahim Arafat with me here. There was a suggestion earlier on that the woman we were hearing from was being attacked by pro-Morsi militias. I'd like your thoughts on that in just a second. But going back to what Shireen was saying there, did Mohamed Morsi come in as a naive man, suddenly find that there's realpolitik and you have to deal with these things, and find himself incapable of addressing the concerns of the whole of the Egyptian people?
The entire Egyptian situation is quite, in a state of flux. So it's very hard for any president to control Egypt unless he comes up with a great consensus, unless he approves a plan with all Egyptian, political wings over a future plan for the entire country. President Morsi, as a former member of the Muslim Brothers, he did not have enough training in politics. So when he assumed power, and he was not supposed to become Egypt's president on behalf of the Muslim Brothers, he came, after Khairat al-Shatir was kicked out of the race. So Mohamed Morsi was not qualified to become the president. And I have to add to this, as I said before, the ideological nature of the Muslim Brothers. This group looks at the president of Egypt today as a member of its group, as a loyal and faithful, person to the group, not as only an Egyptian president. So